In 2019, teenager Greta Thunberg made headlines when she sailed across the Atlantic Ocean from her home in Sweden to New York City. By sailing, Greta was avoiding generating the excessive CO2 emissions from plane travel so that she could attend the United Nations Climate Action Summit. She spoke to leaders from all over the world, confronting them head-on, repeatedly asking them, "How dare you?" as she spoke for her generation. She wanted to know why they used their scientific advancements and ways of life to their advantage without thinking of the consequences they would have on the environment. Greta has led a movement around the world, school striking for climate change every Friday and organizing the global climate strike, in which over 6 million people participated. The story of Greta shows the value of trusting scientific information from environmental experts and having people on your side. But Greta's movement and her courage to move forward draws from many who have gone before her, including Rachel Carson. Within American history lies the story of Rachel Carson, a woman who fought for the lives of others by fighting for the environment while she was fighting her own battle of breast cancer. Carson tragically died only 2 years after her controversial book, Silent Spring, came out in 1962. Silent Spring and the events that followed have allowed Carson to be famed as one of the most influential and important figures in environmental activism in history. Over everything, Carson was first and foremost a marine biologist. Carson's books, which she wrote about her reverence for the earth and the earth's elements, specifically the ocean, allowed her to rise to fame as a renowned author. Growing up in Springdale, Pennsylvania, Carson developed a love for the outdoors at a young age. She not only loved nature, she also loved to write about nature. Carson studied at the Pennsylvania College for Women, the Woods Hole Marine Biological Laboratory, and Johns Hopkins University, where she got her MA in zoology. After graduating, Carson went to work as a writer for the United States Bureau of Fisheries, where she initially wrote radio scripts before eventually working her way up to becoming the United States Fish and Wildlife Service's editor-in-chief for all of their works. Carson then became a published author, releasing Under the Sea Wind in 1941, The Sea Around Us in 1952, and The Edge of the Sea in 1955. All three of these books have been called a biography of the ocean that caused readers to be greatly moved and even changed the way that they thought about nature. People began to recognize Carson's talent and incredible ability to write about the feeling of nature. She ignited a respect for the natural elements of the earth among her audience. Carson continued to write about nature, but everything changed when she began to learn of the disturbing reality of the recent advances in pesticide development. She extensively researched what was happening as a result of these advancements and what will continue to happen in the future. She put it all in her landmark 1962 book, Silent Spring. This text sparked a global environmental movement in which Carson was the spokeswoman. Although Carson spoke very scientifically, in a way that many people may have not understood, she did have a unique way of proving her scientific points and arguments. Many of Carson's claims were heavily debated. When Silent Spring was released, it was called the most controversial book of the year. Carson was even antagonized by the public, accused of being a communist and a hysterical female. This happened as she rose, becoming both a scientific author and an environmental activist. She was a public figure during the Cold War, when scientific advancement was renowned by the public, who was increasingly interested in what was happening in the scientific field. So, what were these claims? And why were they so controversial? Well, the number one thing Carson focuses on in Silent Spring is the dangers of DDT. DDT is a chemical pesticide that was developed by scientists during World War II and used to protect United States soldiers from malaria. When this was reported to the public, people began to have a favorable view of DDT, and it was eventually available for them to buy. On page 8 of Silent Spring, Carson describes how DDT has interrupted the balance between insects and the ecosystems in which they inhabit. She writes, "Since DDT was released for civilian use, a process of escalation has been going on, in which ever more toxic materials must be found. This has happened because insects, in a triumphant vindication of Darwin's principle of survival of the fittest, have evolved super races, immune to the particular insecticide used. Hence, a deadlier one has always to be developed, and then a deadlier one than that." Her words warned readers of what was happening then and what would continue to happen in the future. Silent Spring launched a movement warning people of the dangers of DDT and other pesticides, which she eventually brought to the United States House of Representatives and American organizations in which it would affect greatly, including the Garden Club of America. Out of ethos, logos, and pathos, we could make an assumption that Carson used logos the most, as she was a marine biologist. And logos is based on logic, such as statistics and facts. Although she most definitely had science on her side, a huge part of the controversy was the fact that people revered scientific advancement, and the development of DDT was considered an advancement that benefited Americans. People did not like the fact that Carson was telling them something they thought was great actually did more harm than good. Knowing that people would not trust her claims based on facts alone, Carson developed a unique way of using ethos. She used one powerful force of humanity: doubt. By simply telling people it's okay to have uncertainties and doubts, even in science, she was able to win people over. In her 1963 address to the Garden Club of America, we find a prime example of her use of ethos. She says, "In looking at pesticide situation today, the most hopeful sign is an awakening of strong public interest and concern. People are beginning to ask questions and insist upon proper answers instead of meekly acquiescing in whatever spraying programs are being proposed. This in itself is a wholesome thing." Today, the main method used by environmental activists is pathos. Carson displayed this through her diligence by researching extensively and devoting her life to writing about the planet. She also continued to show up even as she battled breast cancer. Another way Carson displayed pathos was by her continuous devotion to her claims, even when people doubted her greatly. Rachel Carson was a pioneer in environmental activism, which is now having its moment in the 21st century. Because of her efforts, people like Al Gore, Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Greta Thunberg have been given the space to step up and raise even more awareness that things that we may think are good are actually silent and slow killers of both ourselves and our entire planet. Thank you.